I never believed the stories about Blackwood Forest. The locals warned me. They said the forest was wrong, that it moves, that people go in and never come out the same. They talked about whispers at night, shifting trees, figures watching from the darkness. I laughed it off. I was a survivalist, an expert in deep woods trekking. I had camped alone in remote places where no one had set foot for years. So when I heard about a vast, untouched area in Blackwood Forest that had never been mapped, I was intrigued. I packed my gear and set out. That was my first mistake. I hiked into Blackwood at sunrise, expecting nothing more than dense trees, maybe some wildlife. But the deeper I went, the more unnatural it felt. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, no distant animal calls. Just my boots crunching against the underbrush. It felt like the trees were listening. By midday, I should have heard at least a single bird, a single gust of wind. But there was nothing. The silence clung to me, thick and heavy. I set up camp near a clearing, shaking off the unease. I told myself it was just my imagination. But then night fell. I woke up around 2 a.m. to a sound that made my stomach drop. Whispering. It wasn't the wind. It was voices. Low, hushed, coming from all around my tent. I held my breath, straining to listen. The words weren't clear, like they were just out of reach.
I unzipped my tent just enough to peek outside. My flashlight flickered as I swept it over the trees. Nothing. Just the dense forest, motionless. Then I noticed something. The trees around my camp, they were different. They weren't in the same place as when I had set up camp. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just disoriented from waking up suddenly. But deep down, I knew. Something wasn't right. I zipped the tent back up, gripped my knife, and waited for sunrise. By morning, I had convinced myself I had just been dreaming. I packed up my gear and continued deeper into the forest. Around midday, I stumbled upon something that stopped me cold. Footprints. Not mine. They were barefoot, human, and they circled my camp. I knelt down, touching the prints. They were fresh. Someone or something had been watching me while I slept. I felt the prickle of eyes on me like something was hiding in the trees just beyond my vision. I gripped my knife tighter and moved faster. I hiked for hours, determined to reach the far side of the forest. I wanted to prove the stories wrong. But as night fell, I realized I wasn't making progress. It was as if I was walking in circles. Frustrated, I set up camp again, forcing myself to ignore the gnawing fear in my chest. That night, the whispering came back. But this time it was closer. And this time, it spoke my name. A low, rasping voice, dragging out my name like it was tasting it. I clenched my jaw, refusing to react. I wouldn't let fear take over. But then, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, right outside my tent. I gripped my flashlight and my knife, my heart pounding. Then, a shadow passed over my tent. Something was standing outside. I forced myself to move, throwing the tent zipper down and shining my light out. Nothing. But the whispering didn't stop. It was still circling me, still saying my name. That's when I noticed the trees. They had moved again. I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against a tree, knife in hand, flashlight clutched in my shaking fingers. And then I saw it. A figure. Too tall. Too thin. Its arms too long, fingers twitching. It stood just beyond my light's reach. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, watching. It didn't move. It just stared. I couldn't see its face, but I felt its eyes drilling into me. I forced myself to breathe, stay calm. But my gut was screaming at me to run. I blinked, and it was gone.
But I knew it wasn't gone. It was just hiding. At first light, I ran. I didn't check my compass. I didn't stop for water, I just ran. The trees blurred around me, their shapes shifting, twisting. The whispering never stopped. It followed me. And then I broke through the tree line. I collapsed onto the road, gasping for air, my entire body shaking. A passing truck skidded to a stop. The driver, an old man, rushed out. "You were in Blackwood alone?" His face paled. "You're lucky." "Lucky for what?" I choked out. He didn't answer. He just pointed to my backpack. I turned it over, and my stomach dropped. The fabric was ripped open, clawed. Something had been in my bag, and carved deep into the material, too precise to be random, too sharp to be human nails, was a single word: stay. I never went back to Blackwood Forest, but sometimes when I wake up at night, I still hear the whispering, and I know it's waiting. I never should have gone into Ravenwood Forest. The town whispered about it. People went missing there. Bodies were never found. Search parties always came back. Different. Some claimed the forest swallowed them. Others said they were taken. But I was a journalist. I didn't believe in stories. I believed in facts. So when I heard about the most recent disappearance, a group of hikers who vanished without a trace, I knew I had to investigate. That was my first mistake. The road leading into Ravenwood was nothing but a dirt path, lined with trees so thick they blocked out the sky. I parked my car at the trailhead and checked my gear. Camera, notebook, flashlight. I even brought a satellite phone. None of it mattered. Because the moment I stepped into Ravenwood, the world shifted. The air felt heavy, thick, like it was pushing down on me. There were no sounds, no birds, no rustling leaves, just the sound of my own breathing. I walked deeper in, following the hiker's last known trail. The deeper I went, the more wrong everything felt. The trees were too still. The path felt different. And then I saw the first sign of them. I nearly walked into it. A small doll, hanging from a tree. It was made of twisted twigs and cloth. Its head, a bundle of tightly wound human hair. My stomach turned. I looked up. There were dozens, hanging from every tree, swaying in the still air. I wasn't alone. Someone else had been here. That's when I saw the footprints, fresh, leading off the trail and deeper into the trees. I should have turned back. I should have run. But I didn't. I followed the prints for what felt like hours. The deeper I went, the darker it got, even though it was still midday. The trees blocked out so much light it felt like sunset. And then I saw it. A cabin. It stood in a small clearing, surrounded by those damn dolls. The door was slightly open. Something inside was moving. I raised my camera, snapping a picture. The moment I did, the door slammed shut. My stomach twisted. I wasn't alone. I crept forward, heart hammering. The silence pressed against my ears. I peeked through a cracked window. The cabin was empty. Just a small wooden table in the center, a single chair, and a pile of rotting animal bones in the corner. And then the whispering started, low, raspy, coming from inside the cabin. I stepped back. A hand slammed against the window. I stumbled back, flashlight shaking as I aimed it at the glass, but there was no one there. Just a print on the glass, a perfect bloody handprint. And then I heard it. Laughing. Not normal laughter. Something was laughing, but it didn't sound right. I turned and froze. Across the clearing, standing half hidden behind a tree, was a man. Or at least, I think it was a man. He was tall, too tall.
His arms hung too low, fingers twitching, his head tilted at an unnatural angle as if his neck had been broken. And then he smiled, wide, too wide, like his mouth had been stretched open. He didn't move. He just stood there, smiling, watching. I ran. I sprinted back toward the trail, lungs burning. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't find it. The trail was gone. I stopped, chest heaving, spinning in circles. I was lost. The whispering came back, closer this time. Branches snapped behind me. I turned. The smiling man was closer, and he wasn't alone. More figures were stepping out from between the trees. Dozens of them, all too tall, all their heads tilted, all smiling. They didn't move fast. They just watched, waiting. Then the first one took a step forward, and I ran. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually I saw it. A tree, black as night, standing alone in a clearing, and at its base, a hole, a pit, carved deep into the earth. The whispering turned into screams. I had no choice. I jumped. I don't remember the fall, just darkness, and when I woke up I was somewhere else. A room, small, made of stone, a single door, a single candle flickering against the damp walls, and in front of me, a table. On the table, a book. I picked it up with shaking hands. The pages were yellowed, rotting. I flipped to the first page, and my breath caught in my throat. It was filled with names, names of everyone who had disappeared in Ravenwood, every person, every hiker, every missing child, all listed in this book, and at the bottom of the list, my name. The candle flickered. I wasn't alone. A shadow moved in the corner of the room. I turned, heart pounding, and someone else was there, sitting in the darkness, smiling. I never left. I don't remember escaping. I don't remember how I got out of that pit. But somehow, I woke up on the edge of the forest. The sun was rising. My car was right where I left it. But when I looked at my hands, they were covered in dirt, like I had crawled out of a grave. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I left town that same day. But sometimes when I'm alone at night, I hear whispering. And in my nightmares, I see them, smiling, waiting. Because I know the truth now. You don't leave Ravenwood. It lets you think you did. But you're never really gone. And one day, I know, they'll come back for me. I never wanted to go back to Black Hollow Forest. I grew up near that place, and the stories were enough to keep me away. People went missing there. Hikers, campers, even search parties sent in to find them. None of them ever came back. Some said the forest itself moved, shifting like a living thing, trapping you inside. Others claimed something lived in those woods, something that took people and erased them. I thought it was just folklore, until I went in myself. It started with a man named James Carter, a seasoned outdoorsman, ex-military, and an experienced hiker. He knew those woods better than anyone. But 2 months ago, he went in and never came out. Search teams found his campsite intact, fire still smoldering, gear neatly placed, but no sign of him. No footprints leading away, no struggle, just gone. His family begged for answers, but authorities had none. That should have been the end of it. But then his voice came back. 3 weeks after his disappearance, campers reported hearing James, not seeing him, hearing him. His voice would call out from the trees, "Hey, over here, I'm lost." But no matter how hard they searched, no one could find him. Some claimed they heard him begging for help, voice cracking in the distance. Others heard him laughing. One man swore he saw James, standing between the trees, staring at him, grinning. But when he blinked, James was gone.
That's when I knew I had to investigate. I went alone. Armed with a flashlight, a knife, a GPS, and a notebook, I stepped into Black Hollow. The air was different inside, thick, damp, too quiet. My footsteps made no sound on the trail. The deeper I went, the more the trees seemed to lean inward, like they were watching. 2 hours in, I reached James's last known campsite. Everything was still there. His tent, his gear, his flashlight, batteries dead. But something was wrong. The trees around me weren't the same ones I had passed coming in. And then I heard it. "Hey! Over here! I'm lost!" I froze. James. The voice was coming from deeper in the woods, but it wasn't right. It sounded too clear, too close, like he was standing right behind me, whispering in my ear. I turned. Nothing. Just trees. But the moment I looked away, the voice started again, and this time it was laughing. I tried to head back, but the trail was gone. I had marked the trees as I walked, small red flags tied to the branches, but now they were missing. Or worse, they had moved. I should have been panicking, but instead something else took hold. A feeling, like I was being watched. The trees weren't just blocking my way back. They were guiding me somewhere I didn't want to go. Then up ahead, I saw it, a clearing I hadn't seen on any map, and in the center stood a man. He faced away from me, standing completely still. I crept closer, flashlight shaking. His clothes were torn, his skin was pale. And as I stepped closer, I saw his hands were wrong, fingers too long, twitching slightly. "James," I whispered. He turned, and my stomach dropped. It was his face, but not him. His eyes were hollow, his mouth stretched too wide, and then he opened it. A sound came out, but it wasn't a voice. It was static, like a broken radio. Then, movement. Behind him, stepping out from the darkness, more figures, identical, all wearing James's face, all smiling. I ran. Branches slashed my arms, my legs burned. The whispering followed me all around. James's voice, overlapping, laughing, calling, begging. But then, I saw it. The red flags, the ones that had disappeared, they were back, leading me forward. I followed them, and suddenly, I was out. I stumbled onto the main road, gasping for air. The forest was silent behind me. The figures were gone. But something felt wrong, like something had followed me out. I left that town the next day, but at night, when I'm alone, I still hear his voice, calling, laughing, and sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see him, smiling, waiting, because I know the truth now. James never left Black Hollow, and neither did I.